This 2020 has been an absolute masterpiece of a season, with the best team changing from race to race with controversies and a super close battle for the top step. That is if you ignore the top two teams who just ran away with the first two places in the championship. Yes, today we're going to be analysing this year's battle for the midfield supremacy between McLaren, Renault and Racing Point, which when I'm writing this video at the end of the Imola Grand Prix, there is a single point between the three teams. Before we begin, please consider subscribing if you want to support me and the content I make. It's free and it really helps me out. First off, let's begin with describing the position they are fighting for, third. Ever since the third year of the hybrid era in 2016, we had the same top three teams after Williams started dropping down in performance once again, and Ferrari got their shit together with their hybrid power unit, with Mercedes at the top and Ferrari and Red Bull fighting for second place. If we take this year's Italian Grand Prix out of the equation, those three teams have had an interrupted presence in the podium ever since the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix. That's 8 years, but with the whole Ferrari debacle, we've seen them drop in performance significantly over the season, and leaving that third spot up for grabs for the first time in a long while. Which also means that if there's an off weekend for Mercedes or Red Bull, there's a position up for grabs on the podium, which pretty much has always been filled by the teams we're going to take a look at today. Now let's talk about those teams, in no particular order, starting with Renault. The Renault F1 team is in the best positions they have been on since they rejoined F1 in 2016. They have been improving steadily up until last year when they were outperformed by their customer team. From the backmarkers they were in 2016 after taking over the Lotus team, they impressed in 2017, moving up to 6th and finished 4th leading the midfield in 2018. They moved up significantly on the championship standings and they were looking to bridge the gap to the top teams for the beginning of 2019. But a resurgent McLaren cut their wings and Renault struggled to keep 5th position away from Toro Rosso by the end. It was a PR disaster, and the team's continuity in the sport was put in question multiple times up until the new CEO took the reins. 2020 has got on to an underwhelming start, but over the season they have been quietly improving their machinery. After the first 3 events, they were sitting in 6th behind the Ferrari with 12 points to McLaren's 41. And after the Spanish Grand Prix, the gap remained pretty much the same, still in 6th and still 30 points behind Racing Point and McLaren. But then came Spa, and ever since they have been getting better and better, closing the gap race after race to now be 3rd in the championship. With a pre-Belgium average of 7.2 points, they have ramped up their scoring, doubling that average to 14.1 for the 7 following events. The in-season development and the drivers gaining more and more confidence have left the team with 2 podiums in the last 3 races, and debates of whether they are going to be the dark horse to lead the midfield at the end of the year. Now let's get to McLaren. The Woking team are in the midst of a resurgence after the disastrous McLaren-Honda partnership fiasco, which I have explained and is up there in the iCard if you want to give it a watch, and have struggled with the Rogue Aero package for 2018, which wouldn't respond to upgrades, leading to pretty much no increase in performance from the first race. They finished 6th and only ahead of Racing Point because they got their tally wiped mid-season. 2019 was a total resurgence. With a whole team restructure, they emerged at the top of the midfield after a few rocky performances at the beginning of the year. Outperforming their suppliers Renault, it was a dominating year for McLaren. 2020 looked to have resumed where they left off in 2019, with a podium at the opening event in Austria, and they were leading the midfield at the first few races, but have been switching between 3rd, 4th and 5th lately. That's been because their performances have always been one-sided, but not for talents or pace-related issues. They have had horrible luck for one side of the garage all year long, and it seems to switch every race, with 2 podiums, one of them almost a win. They went from leading the midfield comfortably to starting to struggle at pretty much every event to keep up with the other 2 teams. McLaren have changed their aero philosophy mid-season, looking to get a package closer to that of the Mercedes for the 2021 introduction of the German engine to their chassis. They definitely have wrinkles to iron out, but with 4 events remaining to this season, they have to get their shit together and fast, because otherwise they're going to get trampled by Renault and Racing Point. Now let's talk about them. Racing Point, the most controversial team on the 2020 grid that, let me remind you, are currently running with an illegal car to this day. Racing Point have had tons of controversy this year, but first a bit of backstory on the past few seasons. Previously known as Force India, Racing Point have always been at the top of the midfield or thereabouts, making the most of every euro available on the tight budget and overachieving year after year. that was until 2018. They always had money issues, but this time it was different. With the team owner BJ Malia, a man who has Sohan as a hairdresser, having had his assets seized and therefore leading to a halt in funding for the team, they ended up almost folding and being pushed into administration by driver Sergio Perez in the middle of the season. Lawrence Stroll and a team of investors ended up purchasing the team, but since they did an Andrea Moda and didn't purchase the entry from Force India, they had to enter as a brand new team, as Racing Point Force India, and had their points wiped as a constructor. All these financial issues took a definite toll on the 2019 car, as they couldn't start with the development if they didn't even know if they would exist for next season. Therefore, the 2019 car was a homologated version of the 2018 model. They had a low-key year, trailing the midfield and finishing 7th. But with this cash injection and the decision to ditch the 2019 car early, they went fully into 2020 and developed what was unveiled to be the so-called pink Mercedes, due to the extreme similarities to the 2019 championship winning car, with a seemingly aerodynamic clone coincidentally with the same Mercedes power unit. Since the beginning of the season, other teams have been outraged over this and lodged various complaints, mainly Renault, and after coming to the conclusion that they had indeed breached the sporting regulations, they were docked 15 points from their season total for copying the Mercedes brake ducts. Racing Point got off to an unsurprisingly strong start, battling with the McLarens and looking like the midfield favorites for the first half of the season. But that Mercedes package was inevitably going to lead to issues. They achieved this by taking a highly detailed, already existing picture of the whole era of the Mercedes and reverse engineering it to make their 2020 car, which worked at first, but the problem came when the mid-season developments that every team undergoes. And with the noticeable diversion from the Mercedes vision, it is clear to see that they have gone on their own way and that the advantage they had was just for the beginning of the year. It's a hard to develop car, that RP20, and with the recent drop in point collecting leaving them 5th in the championship, they have been hanging on due to Perez's amazing performance in the last few races, making the most out of the dire tire predicament F1 find themselves in, nursing those tires to take him onto podium contention every other race. They've had only one podium all season at the Monza Grand Prix, and they have to hold on for dear life now as the F1 Tide does its thing with the allegedly stopped aero development. When looking at these three teams, there are three clear upgrade patterns, as shown here on this 100% scientific and accurate graph. Racing Point have had a strong package at the beginning, but eventually the upgrade slowed as they switched their focus to 2021. They've had only one big upgrade at the midway point of the season that we could see most clearly on the side pods, with the sloping design. McLaren have brought an aero package to the beginning of the season and have kept upgrading it throughout the season to keep it up with the pace of development and not fall behind, although introducing some new bits that have not been responding as they should have been. Renault have done the exact opposite of Racing Point, trailing the midfield at the beginning of the season, but with the strongest mid-season development and the actual understanding of the car, they have rocketed their way up to being contention for 3rd place. We now have 4 events remaining. Will we see Renault on top? Will Racing Point catch up? Can McLaren keep up with the development? Leave your answers in the comments below. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say on this. As always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the next one.